Brown IPA, also known as Texas Brown Ale, is a style that combines the malt-forward, slightly roasted characteristics of a brown ale with the hop intensity and bitterness typical of an American IPA. Brülosophy contributor Will Lovell brewed one, cutting a bunch of corners, then served the beer to 22 participants. How well was this short and shoddy beer received? Let's find out. This episode is sponsored by Kegland. More on them in a bit. When American brown ale hit the scene in the early 90s, it was described as an English brown ale, but with more hops. From this birthed the style known as Brown IPA, which is, yes, an American brown ale with even more hops. And Brülosophy contributor Will Lovell is here to show us how he brewed this style, short and shoddy style. So, Will, why were you interested to brew this style?
Well, first off, Texas Brown Ale. Who more fitting in the Brülosophy contributors than me to brew this style in a short and shiny method? Also, I kind of like the idea in this modern world where we shun all things crystal malt and hoppy beer styles to kind of just go back to our olden days where crystal malt and hops could join together as one, so I could have a nice malty backbone to counteract that hop bitterness. And honestly, I think it's a pretty delicious combination.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Now, the BJCP described this style as hoppy, bitter, and moderately strong like an American IPA, but with some caramel, as you mentioned, chocolate, toffee, and/or dark fruit malt character, as in an American brown ale. And the statistics are quite broad on this one, so that an IBU anywhere between 40 and 70, and it can go from 5.5% ABV to a boozy 7.5%. Which end of the scale would you go?
I believe I went kind of more in the middle. I don't like them super boozy, but I do like a beer that has a little bit of backbone there. So pretty straightforward malt bill. I just did about 65% pale malt, added 14% Munich malt. Of course, short and shoddy is not short and shoddy unless you add some table sugar to kind of dry it out a little bit. So I did 1.5 pounds of table sugar to kind of add 10% of the fermentables to kind of dry it out a smidge. And then 12 ounces of Crystal 60, 8 ounces of pale chocolates, kind of not the most normal thing. And then just a touch of Victory and then 2 ounces of roasted barley just to kind of get a little bit more color. But let's just be honest, that's kind of the kitchen sink malt bill there. But hey, we're going to see how it turns out.
Right, not exactly the simplest malt bill, but you got a bit of everything. So tell me about the hop schedule. What did you add there? Because the hop component is so important to this style.
Well, for hops, I kind of went with a charge of around 35 grams of Pacific Jade at the 30-minute mark because it was a 30-minute boil, 30 grams of Northern Brewer at 15 minutes, and then we did Cascade, about 30 grams of that, which is a little bit over an ounce, at 5 minutes, and then towards the end, I think I was trying to finish off some bags of things because I have some really weird numbers. So I have Flame Out Mark at 47 grams of Amarillo Lupomax. End of that bag, I remember it being empty and having to dump it out. And then 30 grams of Cascade at the 1 minute mark. And then I dry hopped 45 grams of Amarillo Lupomax 3 days in, along with 45 grams of Centennial and 45 grams of Vista.
Now, short and shoddy brew days are my favorite brew days because it's nice and quick. In fact, that's how I generally brew anyway, if I'm not brewing a Brülosophy experiment beer. So tell me about your brew day. Talk me through how it went.
I milled the grains, I got the water going, and then I went to eat dinner around 6:15. So 30 minutes to kind of get my water collected and together and treated. Turn on the heater, let it heat up. 30-minute mash. As soon as that was over, with beauty thing with the Delta All-in-One, is I just pulled the malt pipe out, set it up, set it to start going to a boil. After it came to a boil, I went ahead and added the hops at the additions of what I just described. When that was complete, I put in my immersion chiller and I cooled it down to 88 Fahrenheit, give or take. And then I just went ahead and transferred it into sanitized Delta All-in-One, and then use the glycol to get it down the rest of the way of my fermentation temperature.
Talk me through fermentation and getting the beers ready to be served.
So this one, I use glycol. My yeast of choice for this particular beer, I believe, was A09 Pub, which is one of my personal favorite yeast choices. It's the fuller strain, if memory serves. And so I fermented that guy around 66F. After I cold crashed it in the keg, I think I went back in and added some gelatin to it as well, just to kind of get it a little bit clearer.
Now, Will, you serve this beer to 22 participants and you asked them to complete a survey on what they thought of this brew. But before we get to that, a quick word on today's sponsor, Kegland. Kegland are the ultimate destination for all your brewing and dispensing requirements. For example, they offer the reusable Oxybar kegs, which are perfect for sharing beers with friends. I'm a big fan of the versatile duo-type system for liquid and gas hookups, and I serve my beers through NukaTap draft beer taps. Kegland also have a killer YouTube channel hosted by Key, where you can learn all about their latest products. Check out all Kegland have to offer at kegland.com.au. Okay, so Will, before we get to the survey results, what were your impressions of this beer?
So here is my Texas Brown, or Brown IPA, if you will. When I take the aroma, with some nice kind of like caramel notes and toffee notes, maybe a hint of citrus in there for me. And then when I take a drink, again, you have that nice kind of caramel toffee, just a very lovely kind of malty backbone, but then you have kind of the resinous bitterness from the hops kind of coming in and supporting it, and they're kind of balancing each other out. I think some of the more floral and citrus components might get lost with the malt, but overall, a really tasty beer style, really tasty beer. I love how everything kind of balances out.
Okay, so let's see what other folks thought about this beer. So you had a total of 22 participants participating in this short and shoddy evaluation, and participants were informed of the specific beer styles. So we did tell them what the beer was. And then we also provided the BJCP description prior to completing the survey. Then tasters were instructed to rate how hoppy, malty, and dry they perceived the beer to be on a 0 to 5 scale. So a rating of 0, that means not at all, and a rating of 5, that means extremely. So what do you think about the data here?
Well, it seems to be a little bit all over the board. It seems like we got equal responses for hoppy, malty, and dry and attenuated. So I think we can probably thank that 1.5 pound charge of sugar in there for kind of drying it out a little bit for us. But it's very interesting that it was pretty even across the board. But it was a hoppy, malty beer by definition.
Right, not too much consensus there. Now, hop characteristics, that was the next question. And again, results are all over the place here.
Looks like we had 4 people say fruity, 3 people say earthy. Spicy and pine resinous were the 2 most prominent at 6 apiece. That's probably what I thought was the most prominent, was kind of a resinous character. Somebody rated 2 people rated floral, and then 1 person with dank and caddy, which I don't think I got dank and caddy from this at all, but, I don't have this person's palate. Nobody selected melon, nobody selected berry, nobody selected onion garlic. I didn't pick that up either, but probably pine resinous was the most dominant to me. Spicy is probably also a good second pick, so it's not surprising to me that those are the 2 most common picks.
Yeah, and then malt characteristics, again, pretty widely dispersed as well.
Yes, the most prominent malt characteristics, I believe the top 2 were roast and then nutty. I'm not sure that I would describe this as a roasty beer, because the only roasted malt I put in was a couple of ounces of something for color. But I got more of kind of a nutty, toasty characteristic. So nutty got 6 tasters, caramel sweet with 4, which I kind of get that. There was kind of a toffee caramel character. Toffee or toasty got 5, and then cracker and bread crust with only 1, which I can get. It's not a very pale malt bill, so but nobody rated chocolates. Apparently my pale chocolate didn't influence it too much on the chocolate category.
Then we get to the yeast characteristics, and 5 prominent yeast characteristics is quite impressive, Will.
Yes, I agree that it's quite impressive. I'm not really sure where some of these came from. So 10 people said esters. So that's interesting. That was the most prominent. So apparently 10 people thought there was an estery profile. Granted, I did use an English ale yeast, so esters would be somewhat appropriate. 3 said phenolics, which I find curious. I'm not sure I detected any phenolics that I would call there. I didn't get any clove, didn't get any banana, thank goodness. I don't really like too much of that in my IPAs. 1 person said sulfur, which is, interesting. 6 people said clean, though, so that's not bad. 6 people have clean. And then 2 people said wild. And so I'm not really sure what they thought was wild about it. Maybe they just clicked on the wrong button. I know if you click somewhere in that menu on the survey, if you click something, it takes you to this page where you have to select esters, phenols, and all that thing. So I'm not really sure how they got to wild, but okay. But I think the majority being esters, and then the second most being clean, I think I'm okay with that. That's 16 of our tasters going that route, which I think I can live with.
All right, now to rating the overall beer. So the first question asks how well the beer represents the intended style, and it seemed to do pretty well here.
I'm pretty pleased with this. Most of the people, 9 of the tasters, gave it a 4 out of 5, which is great. And then So 8 of the tasters gave it a 3 out of 5, which I think is, both of those ratings are pretty fair. A huge thanks to the people that gave it the 4 people that gave it a 5 out of 5. And then the one person gave it a 2 out of 5. So I'm probably somewhere between the 3 and 4 out of 5. I thought this was a pretty good brown IPA. I haven't had a ton of them out there in the wild, but this to me seemed to represent most of what the BJCP is describing, with having that malty backbone with the hop characteristics there. But I guess if you're the sulfur and wild guy, then you're probably not real wild about this beer.
Right. But, the next question, the last question, I think, as Brülosophy brewers, this is always our big wild card, right? Because this one is asking, regardless of how close the beer was to the style or not, did the participants actually enjoy consuming it? And I'm always interested to see the results on this one.
Well, one person gave me a 0, not at all. So
0.
I got a 0 out of preference rating. The majority of people, though, 10 of the tasters gave me a 4 out of 5, which is not bad. And then the second most was 5 tasters giving me 5 out of 5, which is pretty impressive. So I really enjoyed this beer. I thought it was great. It's kind of that homage back to the days where people would put crystal malts in there with their American IPAs. I think this is a great style. I think it's incredibly unappreciated. And I do think if you're into malty beers and you like a little hop flavor and aroma to go with them, then by all means, please brew one of these.
Hats off to Texas Brown Ale. Thanks, Will.
Absolutely no problem. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me today.